Hi everyone, this is Roger Rosado. I'm one of the spatial developers on the team, and what we're going to discuss today is Map Manager in the configuration process of spatial. Now for me, I believe it's too large to discuss all in one video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create separate video sessions to help describe and demo most of the Map Manager configuration. So let's start this session as part one. All right, one of the prerequisites before I move on to Map Manager is I hope you have some working knowledge in ArcGIS. That's a product that is created by Esri company that we use for GIS. I hope you guys are familiar with the desktop ArcGIS server and online. And of course, you have to know basic Maximo product knowledge. Here, I post here some helpful definitions for you where I'm discussing so you guys understand a little better. So go through them all, read them here quickly. The GIS object is no more than a maximal MBO representation. As you can see, you can read about map server and the rest. Give you a few seconds to read them. Okay, let's move forward. And a lot of these definitions are actually from um, Esri, ArcGIS Esri definitions, except for the first one. That is ours. The GIS object is ours. Here's some helpful links in case you want to get a little ahead on the spatial product. We also gave you a link for some Esri training there too. Figure I put this at the beginning so you can quickly find it in the deck. All right, we're going to discuss mainly on the map provider spatial. And I'll show you that in a few minutes. This first part, we're going to configure non-secure map services and configure the service layers. And that would include creating the GIS objects and creating the relationship with ArcGIS feature objects. One of the things we're not going to include in the discussion, but I will just mention a few words about it, is the JSON map configuration. Okay, let me go back to the live show before I move on. Okay, second, there we go. All right, here's Maximo. Let's sign in. Everyone should be familiar with this. So as I'm going to go to the Map Manager menu, I want to point out that there's only going to be one single Map Manager menu from now on. There used to be two, and one was designated as spatial. That is removed now. So now it's all combined into one and one Map Manager. And those of you who are familiar with Spatial 7.5, you would notice that the GIS admin menu is gone. You no longer need to worry about that. So let's click on the Map Manager. We don't have anything. This is clean. So what we're going to do is create a new one. We'll call it Map 1. Map 1. Or not. All right. So obviously you know that we're defining the map name and the description. The length and distance unit that you see here, this will describe what type of scaling you want on the map. There's two. There's either kilometers or miles. So you can choose either one. And I'll show you where you can see that on the map, at least shown in one place. The map provider that we're going to discuss in this session is going to be spatial. So let's click on spatial. The next section here is sites. Now, one thing I want to mention about site, a map manager can only belong to one site, if I said that correctly. Meaning that if I create another map, I cannot select the site that's been selected by another map. And what I mean by that is the map manager itself. So as you can see before, I can do, hold on, no. As you can see before, I could do multiple. Oh, I ruined it. Let me just create that real quick. Apologize for that. Map one. Map one. Miles. Okay. So I was going back to what I was discussing about sites. If I create a map manager instance, for example, this object map one, and I define a site, for example, I add a Bedford. When I create another map manager, I cannot put Bedford site because he already belongs to a different map manager. So that's something you must be aware of. So I'll discuss a little bit later on the zoom latitude and longitude. Here, we'll come back to it a little bit later. Okay, the next thing I want to discuss here is map provider options. This appeared when we selected uh, Maximal Spatial as a provider. The geocode service is no more like an address finder on the map. So just want to point that out. It allows you to find and display addresses on the map. And the second one, route service URL, we are currently not using that in spatial. This is for uh, future product. So let's move on to the next thing. We're going to skip web map configuration and map security. Map services. Now, as you may recall, the definition of map services is the way for you to make maps available on the web using ArcGIS. So what we're going to do is we're going to define a few map services. And let me show you the one we're going to do. You click on this. This is on the ArcGIS server REST interface. And I've defined a few map server in here. And so these are the ones we're going to use for the links. So for example, I'm going to use the map service distribution. And I'm going to copy that. Go to open maps. New. Paste that right there. Say order 10. And let's do this. Copy. So all I'm doing is just giving it a name to it. The order number is important. The highest order number is the base map. You must remember that. So if you're defining a base map, which we will here in a minute, it must have the highest number. Okay, now that we have the first map service, to save this, the selected layers will be shown here. And what that is to show you guys, is these two layers that will be displayed so you can select. Now the service layer is really used where Maximo will have an object associated to the layer. So it's where Maximo does its control through that specific layer. So if I was to select one of these, let's say hydrant. Now we are going to create a GIS object, a representation for Maximo to be able to communicate to the ArcGIS server. Let's go down here. So this is new to everyone that some from 7.5. This GIS object configuration parameters replaces what we used to do in 7.5, where you had to configure everything on the back end. The database had to be of the same type, do the DB links, external configuration. That is no longer needed. We're doing everything through the REST API interface of ArcGIS. So let's define one. We're going to define this. So we're going to call this GIS hide 1. And you're going to select the parent MBO. We got to associate this GIS object to one of the MBOs, one of the main MBOs in Maximo. So for this one, I'm going to use asset. Now, system of records, what does that mean? Well, what happens is if ArcGIS is a system of records, then the the if the relationship is coming from the ArcGIS server. In other words, if an ArcGIS server has an object ID of 120, let's say, and you want to relate it back to the asset object, you would have to put that information on Maximo's side because ArcGIS actually holds the relationship information on its side. He's the master. He's the one who's going to tell Maximo what uh, how his relationship will be identified. So once we've done that, select the system record. For example, for those of you who are 7.5, if we were to select Maximo, it would be the old way where we used to define on the ArcGIS server side the feature class. For example, for this is MX Asset Num and MX Site ID would be defined on the ArcGIS side, and we would populate it over there with our max uh, asset num and site ID, because Maximo would be the main system of record. But right now we're going to use ArcGIS system. So when we execute the GIS configuration, this will pop up and it tells you all the attributes that are available from this layer that you can select or deselect. So when the GIS object is created, uh, it will only create with attributes that are being selected. Now you might see this up here in the very top, object ID, OID reference. It's telling you that the object reference ID, its name is object ID, but it doesn't have to be, but for this case it is. And it's pointing here that tells you that this is the main IOD reference number. You cannot deselect it, so we just removed it from the attribute list. The second item here is it will identify any attributes that Maximo is reserved for Maximo. So for example, there was an attribute here called row stamp. Well, that's one of the reserved items in Maximo. So we are not going to create that attribute. So as you can see here, we're going to select all of them. And once I press OK, what it's going to do is do all the configuration that 7.5 used to do in one shot. It would create the GIS object in the database, and it would put a default relationship clause in it. As you can see here, the relationship where clause, this box here, is directly retrieved from the asset object relationship tab. It's directly retrieved from that. And also directly, this is new, this is directly related to a new object in Maximo called JSON resources that's created. And what it does is it helps communicate through the ArcGIS or actually any other uh, uh, sources that you can communicate through the REST API. I'll show you that in a minute. So right now, since you see this relationship is only 1 equals 1, we want to change that. So what we're going to do is create one, create a new row. This will always come up empty because it's, we want you to make sure you select what you want the first time. If not, you're going to have to redo it again. So the parent MBO, we know that is asset num. So, but remember that the system of record is owned by ArcGIS. So ArcGIS side, the feature class object that gets created, will dictate what the relationship would be over on maximal side. So I'm going to use for this let's see, maybe we'll use a serial number. That's probably not used much. It's all right. I know it's just fictitious. You can make your own attributes later on and select it later in your parent MBO, but we'll do this for now. And we're going to equal it, equal to, and I'm going to use the object ID. That is what I'm going to, object ID. Okay, when I press OK, you see the relationship has changed. Now, it was actually changed at the asset database area in the background. And this just retrieves that information from that. And again, also the GIS object resource REST URL is also updated. So what happened here is that everything you used to do to configure between Maximo and the ArcGIS server is done in a few clicks. Before, it was a very long process of configuring the database and database link in and configuring the Maximo externally or manually with some either configuration scripts or manually doing it by hand. So that's all removed. So what I'm going to show you now is the asset object. Let me save this to show you that it was actually done. So let's go to the database, configuration, GIS. GIS hydrant was created as it would have done before in 7.5. And all the attributes are here. These are the attributes that were checked that you decided to keep. And then going back to the list view again, we're going to bring up asset. That's the parent MBO. Click on asset, relationship. And in the relationship, search for GIS again. We always put a spatial underscore in front of the GIS object that was created. Actually, MBO object that was created. So this will always be a spatial underscore, so you know it belongs. And as you can see, the where clause was actually updated as dictated in the panel. Now I'll show you the REST information, which is under integrations, JSON resources. As you can see, the GIS hide one is created here. It basically has some fields here. Other sessions will go in more details on this. This is where all the attributes are stored. Again, this is needed to help with the REST interface between the ArcGIS server and Maximo. And the endpoint is where the URL gets set. Here it is, right here. There it goes. I don't know if you can see that, but it's there. That's where it's at. So it's important that's needed here to do queries and to get the information to do any other work they need to do for that server. Oh, one more thing. I got to go back because I forgot one thing that I wanted to talk to you about. Go back to the map manager. Map one. In fact, what I'll do is I'll create another one here. Let's go here. What I'll do is I'll select another layer. I'll select the meter this time. Okay. Coming down here. I'll say GIS meter 1. I'm going to also create as an asset. And this time I'm going to say the system record is Maximo. Now, this is where I missed a discussion here. In order for me to execute this GIS configuration, you must have a feature server. And what I mean by that is when you post the mapping, the MXD document, the map service, you have the option to have a feature server associated with it. And as you remember from the definition, access the vector features of your map to help perform editing. So in order for us to create this GIS configuration at this time, you must define a feature service. And what is that? Let me show you real quick here. For example, as you can see here, this is a service map server. When I go back one, there's one defined as feature server. So this gets created when you select the capabilities of, it's one of the capabilities that map service provides. So if you're gonna put a map service, publish it, if you're gonna publish a map service, then you must enable the capabilities for feature access. So it will create the feature server. And not only do you need to create the feature servers for this, you must have at least one object in that feature server. It can't be an empty feature server. You gotta have at least one feature object. So let me do one more thing. Let me show you. Let me show you this. Arc, the arc map. Here's the arc map. There's ArcGIS information here. Arc map. Let me give you a second so it shows up. Now, the arc map, when you publish a web service, a screen will pop up right here before you publish. As you can see there, you can import, analyze, preview, and publish. So right before you publish, there's a feature access. This must be checked in order for you to create the feature server. So it's important for you to make sure that this feature server is selected before you publish. This way it creates that feature server. And again, if you already have objects in map service, then it'll create the feature objects associated. They just can't be empty. So going back to Maximo. Going back to Maximo, so we're going to execute the GIS configuration. Like I said, if you didn't have one, a message will come up and says you need a feature service. associated with it. And if you don't have an object underneath it, it will tell you that you need an object for it. So let's execute this one. Basically the same thing you saw before. We can select certain attributes as needed. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is we'll also create the domains for you. Believe it or not, we do that now. We actually create the domains related to the attributes that we use, so you can do a select down on when this attribute is used. So I'm going to say OK, select all the attributes. And then I am going to create a relationship. Now I know that Maximal is the source of record. So I know that the attributes is going to be moved over to the ArcGIS system or server. So I'm going to say, okay, and I believe this one is from 7.5 when we created the setup. So there is a max asset num here. That's cool. And then we can add a new row. Make sure this condition here is set to and. Then we're going to select site ID here. Equal to, and equal to MX site ID. Cool. And then we can save it. Okay. And it updates the relationship that I showed you before and the REST URL in the JSON resources objects. And that is it so far. So let me create a few more here to make sure you guys understand. So let's save this. All right, I'm going to add a maximal data where it holds the work orders and whatever IBM object I want. For example, the maximal data here. There's a work point and service address and server request point. So this is the link that I want. Copy and paste it here. And I'm going to put this 20 layer order 20. And I'm going to say paste it here. Cool. And then I'm going to select the layers. I am going to select work order points and service address point. That sounds good. Okay. Now work order points. Let's do that one first. I'm going to leave it as it should stay a system record because they really belong to the maximal side anyway. That's our stuff. So we're going to do GIS work order point 1. This is, we're going to select work order here. Going to leave that maximal system record. Execute configurations. We only have a few attributes here. We're going to say OK. And the relationship we're going to do, we're going to create it. New row. Since maximal is the system records, we're going to place it over to the GIS side, or GIS side, with the work order number and new record here, site ID, equal MX site ID. Okay. So now we have updated the relationship on the work order object. we've also updated the REST URL. So that's cool. Let's save that so we don't lose it. Oops, got to do one more right here. The server, it gave me an error because I tried to save and I did not define a GIS object to the service address point. Let me do that real quick. Add GIS. You can name whatever you want. I just put GIS so it's easy for me to find it. And then this is service address. So we're gonna select the parent and MBO as a service address. And put the well, we'll put it ArcGIS side. Why not? Owner, execute GIS. Since let me think here. No, let's go back to maximum. Probably best to do execute. And all that sounds good. Then we are going to create a new row. Address code equals to MX address code. That's because we configured that in 75 before. And maybe and here, do and new row, org ID equals MX org. Cool. Okay, so that's all saved. Now we can save this. Now we need a base map on the background. So I have one ready. Select, oops, cancel. New row, map service row. We are going to select, as you can see again, the maximal data has capabilities of feature server. Like again, you cannot create a GIS object without a feature server and an object created underneath that feature service. For example, I'm going to repeat again, work order point, I needed to have an object underneath it. In other words, when I query it, one star, and I query it, I get at least some. See, I thought I have 2 records. So you have to have at least 1 record. So let me go back here and get the base map that I'm using. So base map I'm using is this one. Copy. Just into the map manager. So I'm going to put this order 100. Remember, the base map has to be the highest order. Okay, now I save that. Now I don't have to create any GIS object here because that's nothing that Maximal is going to monitor for. So let's save it. So far, I just wanted to show you that's a simple configuration for spatial. And oh yeah, let's talk about the zoom level of the and latitude longitude. In order to, let me click this. In order to do initial map extent, the map must be enabled. Otherwise, if you know, you can enter it here if you like, manually. But if not, you must enable the map. Save it. Now, the map full extent is not currently being used for future release. Just like what I was talking about, the route URL service is for future release for spatial. Now that I have enabled it, I can click Map Init Extent. As you can see, kind of disappeared here. I don't know where it's at. So what I usually do is, and usually the people who are going to uh, configure this, I put a starter lat longitude, X and Y points. Or if they're doing lat and long, that's fine. They can do lat and long if that's uh, the coordinate system they're using. But ours right now is an X and Y coordinate system of a different type of spatial. So what I did before is I looked for a point on uh, on the map that I want to at least uh, center. So let me find one here. Let me see, do this one. Copy that one. And I'll show you here where you can get it in case you don't have, if you're doing it on your own and you're not sure. Copy, paste. Now I got lat and longitude there. Now the base map that I'm using is a dynamic base map. The reason why I brought that up is because the zoom level will not be updated. Uh, Zoom level seems to be updated only for cached images, cached base maps, because in those they actually tell you each individual zoom levels they're at. So when I click on this map init extent, it will point to the lat and longitude now. Boom, you see. Now that's the center. Now if I move anywhere in here as my center and I press OK, it will update. Oh, look at the zoom level did get updated, but it's 1. Latin Y and X gets updated again to a new point. So when you open this up again, let me save it. When you open this up again, it will go to that new point. Now, if you want to get a closer zoom to it, and you save it, you see the zoom level doesn't get changed. So if you want to get a little closer, you could put like 0.5, save it, and then go into it, and it'll zoom in closer like that. If you want the next uh, another center point, like right here, and you press OK, the Y and X points get updated. So the next time you go in here again, it finds where it was at. Now, what this is for is this gives you initial extent on the map when you first go into it. So he knows how far down to go when he first opens up the map. Now, with that said, it's only an initial extent. If you if you zoom in and out at the map, then it's not no longer going to use the init extent. It'll use whatever you saved, whatever you did last in the zoom. So if you zoomed way out and you left the map and you came back into it, it'll remember that's where the zoom level you had it. So that's that part, the zoom level. That's good. And then let's see if I missed anything. Enabled map. For now, I think that's what I wanted to show so far. Now, again, these we're going to discuss these later on in different sessions. So let's go and let's go to assets, object. Let's do any of them here. The things I want to show you. Okay, an asset. When I go to map, everything should be able to come up without any issue, which it does. Now, one thing I wanted to point out to you is that remember we had the GIS objects had parents as assets. So when I do any edit features, you will see only the ones that are related, who are child of the asset, like meter and hydrant. Okay, and then the same goes if I go to like work order tracking. Go to the first one. Go to map. The server's a little slow. There it goes. And then when I go to the edit mode here, layers not like, oh, okay. In the sometimes if you don't see it there, what happens is, depending on what you defined on your an ArcGIS server, whether to enable the layer at a certain time, when you first load it, it will take that information. But then you would have to come under layers here and just turn it back on. That's all. And let's do the service address also, then close it. Now, when I do the edit, the work order point is there. So, so there was a little catch too. Just make sure that if you don't see it here, it's probably the layer was not enabled. So, so that's the point I wanted to show here. And I believe, let me go back. As you can see, the map is still refreshing. I guess it's kind of slow on me. So I go back to Map Manager. Make sure I remember that I've discussed everything that I wanted to. Enable map. And I believe that's it for now till we go to the next session. So that's the simple configuration for an unsecured map service. And as you can see, we can in the map itself, like assets, create like a new one, like see test one, and go save it, and go to map. Remember, I think the asset, the the feet, which one is it? The hydrant. I think the um, system record was in ArcGIS server. So what we're going to do is I'm going to click. Let me just do identify here. That one here. Find my okay, found it. My hydrant that I want to link to. This is my hydrant, that little triangle. And you could tell again when you go into layers, it'll show you the what it is. Oh, yes, one thing I wanted to show you. Remember when I was doing the scaling, whether I wanted miles or kilometers? You can see here. So if I went back and changed the kilometers, it'll be meters instead of feet. So okay, let's link this hydrant. Okay, let's refresh it. And look at that. We got it tells us that that's our link there for the hydrant. So since the since the hydrant is ArcGIS system of records, that means that object ID, if we recall right, I configured it to the serial number of the asset. It's just a temporary holder. It's just for this demo, but you would probably create your own. As you can see, it's 432. It gets populated. So now there's a relationship between this asset and serial number 432, the hydrant. So when we go back here to that specific hydrant, we click on identify again, click down here. Go search through for hydrant. There it is. And the object ID is 432. So that's how that works. And again, the same thing of the maximal records. What would happen if the maximal is a system of records? What would happen is the max asset num and max site ID would be created. And I think I've done that for. Let me go back real quick. Map manager. Map one. Okay. Order distribution. Meter. And the meter is maximal. So if I was to create, so let's go back and asset and create a new one. Asset test 2, and then asset test 2, and then save this. Oops, what did I miss? Oh, asset test 2. I guess I have one already because I asset test 2. Asset test 3. See. Okay, asset test 3. I go to the map. And I'm going to create one. So I'm going to use the edit tool. I'm going to click on order meters. And I'm going to select this. And I'm going to click it right here. Boom. Alrighty then. Refresh it. I'm sure it's done it. Nope. Wonder what happened there. Test. Select asset. That first site. Test 3. Map. Make sure it's enabled. Work order is not enabled again. Yeah, you gotta be careful for that, I guess. There it goes, work order point. Now I should do it. Edit. Okay, refresh. I'm not sure what's going on here, but it's probably something I did. You go back to Map Manager. RT. Maximal asset, max asset, site ID. It's all correct. Let me probably have to don't think I have to log out and log back in. Let me do that anyways. Go back to nope, sorry. Yep, asset, test. And I see, yeah, I had a few other old ones there. Okay, test 3. Map. There it goes. Now let's create another one here. And put one right here. All right, that one worked. I had to log in and log back in. So you can fill anything you want here. The ones that are edible, or you can fill in. Sometimes they're not. They'll be grayed out if they aren't. So everything's good to go. Then when you press X here, it actually saves the information. At least it should. There it goes right there. Just waiting up on refreshes. So the point is that I want to show you is when I do an identify and click here, and I go through, find the right one here. That's it, my water meter. And you can see down here that the MX num is set and the MX site ID is Bedford because I set the meter for maximal system of record. Okay, I believe I've gone through the first session here. Quickly go to the map manager so I don't forget anything. And that is it for now. So let me go back to the PowerPoint. Slide. All right, so one of the big things I wanted to point out, and those of you who are familiar from Spatial 750, one of the, the biggest improvement is that configuring ArcGIS and Maximo to communicate with each other and to perform a relationship between each other. So what we have done is now that I'm just going to read through the point here. You no longer have to have Maximo and ArcGIS to be on the same database type. For example, if you're using Oracle, you got to use Oracle on ArcGIS server. If Maximo is using MSQL, well, you also had to use MSQL on the ArcGIS server. That's eliminated. Now you can use any database you want on either one, and it'll be okay. You don't have to worry about database links anymore. That's that's a big plus. People had a hard time with that. And oh, yeah, you don't have to configure manually or use external scripts to configure Maximo and ArcGIS so they can communicate with each other. That's a big step. But if for some reason you have Spatial 750X up and running when you upgraded Spatial 760, you can still have the old configuration. They're obsolete, but you still can have them. In fact, you can still create them, but I don't see why. So that concludes this part 1 of Map Manager. I'll see you soon. Bye.